So while we wait for Nintendo to officially unveil to us what they're planning with next generation console hardware, there is no shortage of talks online on new games that may be planned and headed to this platform, as we are now in the season where developers hypothetically do have dev kits, and if you believe sources like Andy Robinson from VGC, Tom Phillips from Eurogamer, amongst many other gaming journalists online, there are supposedly developer kits now in the hands of devs actively, and Nintendo even showcasing what we will call, for the sake of this video, Nintendo Switch 2, we clearly don't know the name of this device yet, is capable of, with big claims like there are versions of Breath of the Wild that run at 4K 60 FPS via docked mode and minimal load times, in addition to things like the Unreal Engine 5 Matrix demo being fully showcased with ray tracing enabled, and all types of what sound like crazy claims on the surface, considering this thing's going to be yet another hybrid console. But considering that Nintendo and Nvidia have partnered up with some kind of unique chipset for this device, and they should be using Nvidia's own DLSS technology, whether it be 3.1 or 3.5, there's a lot of shortcuts that Nintendo will have up their sleeves to potentially bring massive third-party games that are potentially only slated to come to the current gen consoles, such as the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series S and X. And in today's video, we have to discuss yet another leak that claims that a major AAA third-party game will be headed to the Nintendo Switch day one with the other consoles. As you can see the following post over on the R Gaming Leaks and Rumors subreddit, where it reads, Necro Felipe says Far Cry 7 will be a day one launch on the next Nintendo Switch system. Replying to the original Insider Gaming tweet about exclusive information about Far Cry 7, Necro Felipe responded to the tweet saying, this game will launch day one on the next Switch system. He clarifies that Far Cry 7 will launch on the next Nintendo Switch system day one, along with the other consoles as well. The game itself will release on Nintendo Switch day one, rather than the console releasing at the same time. So what he's clarifying there is that the game will come out on day one, meaning when it launches on consoles like the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S, the Nintendo Switch 2 will also share that same launch day, meaning that, yes, if we are to believe this leak, we are talking about yet another major AAA game that is not just getting a version or port to the Nintendo Switch, but it's launching day and date. And I do think that amongst all the hype online and recent reports with the Activision Blizzard King merger set to go through, it's about to close, sounds like in the early or middle portions of October. And we know, according to Microsoft and their signed 10-year deal pen to paper, which is already put to bed, that Call of Duty will be headed to Nintendo consoles for the next 10 years with full content parity. We now have games like Far Cry 7 being added into this conversation. There's also some speculation online whether or not Baldur's Gate 3 might be headed to the next gen platform due to a Nintendo employee being credited in the thanks section, which that may or may not amount to anything. It seems like there's a little bit of history there with that particular employee and other third-party games, but there's a lot of reason to believe that Nintendo might not just have to rely solely on their first-party games lineup like we've really seen them do for the majority of the Switch lifecycle. Does the Switch have tons of third-party support? Yes, it does, and quite a bit more than what we've even seen in consoles past from Nintendo, but I do think that there's still a conversation to be had around a lot of the more modern-looking titles that just sometimes get left behind and totally left out of the conversation on Switch due to the hardware limitations, or we get those lazy cloud ports such as the Kingdom Hearts collection, in addition to multiple of the more modern Resident Evil games, and the devs say, here's your version on the Switch, it's a cloud version, so you have to be connected to the internet, and you better hope and pray that you have one of the most lightning fast connections, which you're still probably going to have latency issues on and response time issues on. It's a big problem, and I am very excited at the prospect that we could be talking about most major AAA third-party games getting a Nintendo Switch version day and date at release. Clearly, this doesn't mean that every major third-party AAA game will get a version on Switch 2, but it does definitely open the floodgates for some of the missing games that we're waiting to see if can run on this hardware. I would love to see a version of Elden Ring be that big technical showpiece for what this console can do from a AAA third-party perspective, maybe even a launch game, since in theory From Software would have plenty of time to get a version of that ready to go around the time that Nintendo plans to launch this thing. But then when we talk about all of the new third-party games that we still have to look forward to, such as Star Wars Outlaws, amongst many others, maybe those do indeed see support on the next-gen console, and they're games that would entirely miss the current gen Switch today. You even have some AAA third-party support in the modern day that are receiving ports to the Switch, but that are coming over in an almost comical way, such as Mortal Kombat 1, which doesn't seem to run that bad. But if you haven't looked around on the internet recently, the graphical textures and just the side-by-side comparison to the modern console versions, it's day and night. And clearly, yes, more love, time, and care could have been put into that port, but there's absolutely a reality check conversation that all Nintendo gamers need to have at this point, that developers are attempting to get some of these modern, very graphically intensive games to run on a Tegra X1 that is from 2015, nearing 10 years since that chip was originally produced. Yes, it was sold inside the Nintendo Switch in March of 2017, but that thing is originally from 2015. That's the kind of tech that devs are trying to get their big projects to run smoothly on. Why do you think we've seen so many delays and or even cancellations of Switch versions of massive games? We know that Hogwarts Legacy was supposed to be a summer game, and the June time window is when that massive third-party game should have seen its Nintendo Switch version launch. That's been pushed to November. No telling on if it's still on track to hit in November or not. I haven't kept up with any reports around that game, but I wouldn't be surprised if it gets kicked back even further, or if it does release and it's just kind of a buggy mess when it ultimately hits the Switch. So if the dev kit power claims are true, like we believe them to be, and I do personally buy into those sources, being from Andy Robinson, VGC, Tom Phillips from Eurogamer, and even Nate the Hate chiming in, and all corroborating the same kind of specifications to expect on this thing, I think there's a lot of reason to be excited, and I think there's a lot of reason to expect Nintendo, with the proven success that they have under their belt with the Nintendo Switch console, with over 129 plus million units. I'm sure they're over 130 plus at this point, and also over a billion pieces of software sold, that most third-party devs that chose to sit out on Nintendo Switch versions of their games will not make that same mistake again, especially with more capable hardware. Not to mention some of the interviews that you have from bosses and CEOs of major publishers just straight up saying that they regret not having a version of their games on the Switch, seeing how successful it is. Well, what better chance to do a do-over and a restart for your third-party support than launching it on a brand new, more powerful successor to an already incredibly successful console? And while there's no guarantee the Switch 2 will be anywhere near as successful as the original Nintendo Switch, I do think that it has a lot more eyeballs on it now from game devs and publishers alike, and that's ultimately great news for us gamers at the end of the day. But I really want to hear from you guys at this point in the video, your personal thoughts and opinions on whether or not you think games like Far Cry 7 are actually in the holster and ready to go day and date launch on the Nintendo Switch 2 alongside the other platforms. Are you excited for a game like this to come over? Could you not care less? And are you like me, and maybe even if you're not into Far Cry that much necessarily, that you're very excited to see potentially a lot more major third-party AAA developed games brought to Nintendo's next generation platform? And do you indeed think that we will see most of the third-party games get a version on Switch 2, and that they will likely launch day and date with the PS5 and the Series X and S? Or do you think that certain games will get that, and there will largely still be big gaps in the third-party AAA lineup when it comes to what makes it to Switch 2's final product? But regardless of your thoughts and feelings on everything we talked about today, I do look forward to hearing from you all in the comments down below before you leave the video, as I do look forward to getting a back and forth conversation started with you all around these topics. Go watch yesterday's video next if you haven't already, which is on screen right now. Also make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.